everybody to the second episode of The Monthly Blend. I'm your co-host, Tian Wong. I'm the CEO of Opus 8, which invests in fintech, health tech, and marketing technology companies through our Phoenix Fund. And we also help early stage companies, other companies, and alternative investment managers raise money through our network of high net worth individuals and family offices. I'm also the founder of the Big Idea CONNECTpreneur community, which is a global community of over 20,000 investors, entrepreneurs, and innovators throughout the US, in fact, throughout the world. The Monthly Blend is a monthly video podcast, which my co-host Anthony Millen and I have recently started. And the purpose of it is to bring together leaders and innovators from the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, also known as the DMV, which stands for District, Maryland, and Virginia. And being in a tri-state locale, there's a lot of silos, both governmental as well as individual and corporate and institutional, with federal agencies and universities. And Anthony and I, our vision is to create a forum where we can talk to game changers and leaders in our community to help break down those silos and really, stimulate entrepreneurship and innovation and take that to another level. So you'll be seeing our monthly video podcast talk about these types of topics that are relevant to that sort of vision. I'll turn it over to my co-host now, Anthony Millen.
Great, thanks, Tien. As Tien said, we're really excited to be bringing you our second edition of the Monthly Blend, and we are very excited about Bob and Troy as our guests today. As Tien mentioned, in addition to our video podcast, we'll be working on other ways through the Monthly Blend to really drive collaboration in the DMV region. A little bit about myself. I have spent the last 20 years in the startup ecosystem as a serial entrepreneur, a venture capital partner, and a startup attorney. I'm currently a venture partner with Urban Us, a seed stage venture capital fund that focuses on urban tech, and also the founder and chair of Next, an innovative new model for delivering legal services to startup and emerging growth companies that combines a broad range of fixed price packages and service bundles to provide predictability to our startup and emerging company clients, delivered by seasoned senior attorneys in a hands-on, high-touch approach, and that incorporates a robust technology platform to help drive a very customer-centric experience that's collaborative, transparent, and efficient. And with that, we hope you enjoyed today's show.
Great. May I add, Anthony, that our viewers and subscribers to please go to themonthlyblend.com and download our video podcast and also subscribe. Welcome, everybody. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our two VIP guests today for the Monthly Blend. First, I'd like to introduce Troy Stovall, who's the new CEO of TEDCO, which is the Maryland Technology Development Corporation. Troy has recently taken the role as the CEO. Prior to joining, Troy was the Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer at the University of District of Columbia. He's had a storied career in education and ed tech. Before that, he was the president of Zenith Education. Prior to that, Troy, you were the Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer at Howard University as well. And you also had a stint at Jackson State University. Prior to starting in the education world, you also worked at McKinsey and were in the financial management business. So we're thrilled to have you. Thank you for joining, and we're looking forward to learning more about what you have to say. And I'd also like to introduce Bob Stalley, who is your counterpart in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Bob is also new in the role as president and CEO of the Center for Innovative Technology in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And Bob has had a solid, long career at CIT, most recently as the Senior VP for Policy. And Bob has been working with the state of the Commonwealth of Virginia, as well as in the technology space for a long time. Bob has been previous head of the Greater Richmond Technology Council. He was also former Secretary of Commerce and Trade for the Commonwealth of Virginia, served in the United States Navy, and is a graduate of the United States Naval Academy at Annapolis. Thank you for your service, Bob. We're thrilled to have you. We're very excited about this because we get to talk about regionalism and how we can work together. And both of you are, for the first time, you're both counterparts in both Maryland and Virginia. And this is the first time you guys are together, and we're thrilled to have you. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me, team. Yeah, thanks for inviting me. Appreciate you being. Bob, pleasure to meet you. Look forward to working with you over time.
Pleasure to meet you too. And although I live and work in Virginia, I was born in Maryland and went to school in Maryland, and so have a great large place in my heart for the state of Maryland.
Outstanding. We'll look forward to that.
Great. Well, again, thank you, Bob and Troy, as TN said, for being on the show with us today. In our kind of first segment of today's show, we want to take a look at the ecosystem at a little bit more of a macro level, both the investor community and the ecosystem overall. And what we'd like to start with is just to get your sense when you look at the ecosystem today, again, both in an investor and a startup perspective versus a few years ago, how you see that it has grown and changed. And specifically in this time, how it's been affected by COVID. And so that is, we'd be just very interested in starting off with your thoughts around that.
Bob, you want to take it? I'm more than happy.
Well, sure. I will start on this one, and I think from a general perspective, we still see a tremendous amount of interest in the startup community. We see the early stage, particularly from our perspective, technology companies as becoming more important to Virginia's economy, more recognized, as a critical part of economic growth in Virginia. We're delighted that the Commonwealth has actually recognized this value. Sometimes in the past, when you're part of an overall economic development strategy, it's difficult to get people to understand what startups are all about, and the importance of startups, particularly when an investment in a startup might not mature or create significant jobs for a number of years. But we in Virginia have just created the Virginia Innovation Partnership Authority, which is a collaboration among several economic development groups, but primarily focuses on and recognizes the importance of early stage companies, of commercialization and ecosystems throughout the regions. But the transition over the last few years, I think in the region, we've seen a lot of the older, more mature funds go away, sunset, if you will, including Valhalla and Novak Biddle, Edison, and some of the others. And, there's been a rise of new funds, to take those places. And a lot of them started by new generations of investors, which, we're excited about as well. But, Squadra, Data Tribe, Rise of the Rest, some of the other, great funds that are, replacing the older ones. And, one of the other things that we see is the proliferation of accelerators now. I think it wasn't long ago that people wondered, what are accelerators all about? And there were a handful, when we started Mach 37, that was kind of a very early stage accelerator. People knew about Y Combinator and Techstars and some of the others, but an industry focused accelerator on cybersecurity seemed to be a question, and it's still doing well, still doing exceptionally well. And I think people are getting a lot of value out of the accelerators. From our perspective at CIT, GAP has been recognized. It continues to be recognized. And thank you again, Tien, for your contribution to that process. But, for the 6th year in a row, it's been CIT GAP Fund has been identified as the most active fund in Virginia. And continues, we now have a leverage ratio of 36-1 for the investments that we make, and have leveraged over $1 billion through that. So from a COVID perspective, just very briefly, I think I've seen less impact than we anticipated. I think we were all really concerned early on that this would be the end of risk taking for a while, and kind of a drop off in the overall number. But we haven't. Certainly, there's some of that. People have pulled back to a certain extent, but we continue to see a lot of interest in early stage companies, and a lot of interest in the follow-on investments as well. But in early stage and seed rounds where we tend to play, we've seen a significant amount of interest continue into what we hope is the later stages of this COVID.
So not to repeat, because I agree with everything that Bob said there at the macro level. And so I think a couple things I'll add to that is it obviously pertains to Maryland. Actually happy to announce that, just yesterday or 2 days ago, the governor announced what we have in here in Maryland called the Future 20, the 20 companies, startup companies that represent kind of the future of Maryland. And of those 20, 13 of them were through TEDCO or have TEDCO funding. And so there's a momentum to that. And I think Bob is exactly right. I mean, one of the things we talk about here in Maryland is that we're not gonna, if we're talking about just restarting what was, the economy in February and January, we will have lost one of the many lessons other than just how to use Zoom that we've learned over these last several months. We've got to, and I know we're going to talk about diversity later on, but there is an opportunity for us to rethink, reposition, and reimagine the economy, and how do we have more participation in that economy by more folks. And Bob is right that we're going to innovate our way out of this. We're not going to just come out of this. We're going to have to innovate, and that's going to be led by these startup companies, both in the technology space and the non-technology space. I think we have to be more open to that and more open to individuals being a part of that. So we're excited about that in TEDCO, but I think the other part, again, to specifics that we're trying to do here is better engage our higher educational institutions. And so we've got a number of instruments that we're doing where we're actually investing directly in trying to create entrepreneurial chairs at our universities. So through our e-innovation fund that we have here in Maryland. We've got through our Maryland Innovation Initiative, how we do tech transfer and acceleration of tech transfer. And I would be remiss given COVID, Tien, the role that Maryland plays around life sciences. So we have obviously a very robust life sciences quarter, especially around 270. A lot of some of the vaccine work that has taken place here in Maryland. A big, I forget the number. I used to have the number. There's been a significant investment from the Project Warp Speed that has made its way into Maryland. And so not only are we trying to integrate those elements of the higher ed and the private sector, but the last point for me is the federal assets here. And so how do we rethink those federal assets, and how do we begin to do what I'm calling spin in and spin out those federal assets? And for me, those federal assets includes the federal labs, as well as the number of military bases that we have here in Maryland. That represents a large chunk of folks that we need to be investing in. And how do we use SBIRs and STRs? We just TEDCO just got awarded some grants around that, and we're launching a university type model to teach people how to use and access to that capital. And to close on this, again, Bob's right that there is an interesting shift that is happening in the capital markets here in the DMV, where the traditional funds are becoming less. And so I think part of what I'm seeing, at least, is there is still a gap there in that early stage, seed stage, in terms of creating a lot of energy there. There's still some gaps there, and we're trying to fill that. And it sounds like CIT is as well with your gap fund. So we've got to find more ways to get that funding there, because I think there is clearly available kind of in that A round and beyond. There's accessibility there. But again, how do you get that, particularly for us, and I think you guys probably have this in Virginia as well, that pre-revenue, pre-seed dollars? How do you kind of get the idea out of ideation stage and allow them enough money to move from ideation to at least some element of seed and then some element of actually launch? And so those elements there, I think, Tien, there's still some struggles there in terms of a robustness of the capital markets around that. But we're trying to fill that. It sounds like CIT Gap is as well.
And if I can just follow up real quickly, I don't want to delay this, but Troy, you hit on really good point, and some of that we just refer to as pipeline. How with all of the really great things that are going on, how do we take some of those early stage companies and get them to the level where some of the angels and others are seeing them, and whether it's commercialization of IP out of universities or the private sector, but exactly as you said, getting the pipeline. The way that we improve the process right now is ensuring that those companies that should be growth opportunities are recognized, and we capitalize on the various programs that exist.
Oh, absolutely. No, I mean, look, and I think again, not to your point, I'm trying to take away from the program. We can, and even though you're focused on Virginia and I'm focused on Maryland, I'm glad teens connected us, because the reality of it is we're DMV, and we got a river that separates us, but that's all it is. It's just a road that separates us. And what happens in Maryland influences Virginia, and what happens in Virginia influences Maryland. And I've made it clear to my legislators, at least, that I get as just an example of kind of cross the river stuff. So I just signed a deal with Navy, the Naval X folks. They're spin out of the Naval Technologies, to help fund a great makerspace in Alexandria. It's a beautiful makerspace that's in Alexandria. And it's using TEDCO funds to do that. And so I'm looking forward to, beyond this conversation, about working to try to, how do we make this a more accessible capital markets, particularly for those early pipeline ideas?
For us, that's just very exciting. When Tien and I started talking about the monthly blend, one of the ideas that we spoke about is just the power of our region as a region. And, these kinds of conversations that we're kind of seeing unfolding today are really exciting to us. When we talk about the region, one of the things we'd be interested to hear from both of you is as you look at the region, what you see are some of the unique strengths. There are a lot of people who will be looking at this from inside and outside the region, but what do you see as some of the unique strengths that we have in our region? And what are some of the challenges that you have that you'd like to see us work on as a macro region?
Yeah, if I may. I mean, I just spoke of the higher ed. I mean, if you just take Northern Virginia, DC, and Maryland, and the area just around the DC area, I mean, you got just an amazing number of higher education institutions. If you go to Baltimore, and then you even take your way down to Virginia, kind of that 95 corridor. If you just take that 95 corridor from Richmond to Baltimore, we got an amazing, just young talent base that hasn't been tapped into. And how do you start to look at them? And again, one of the things we're going to try to do is not so much always talk about tech transfer, because that's the traditional conversation with higher ed. But how do we just spur entrepreneurship? How do I get that kid that's just thinking about a great idea? And how do we connect them? And how do we make them, one of the, we got 5 of us on this call here. And I said, if I asked the 5 of us the definition of an ecosystem, I'll probably get 10 different definitions. And so my 11th is the definition for me of a well-functioning ecosystem is this is a great example today. Any 2 people or any 2 organizations, the degrees of separation between them has to be minimized. That's how you build a strong ecosystem, because people know people, and people can connect to people, and people can connect the things that need to be connected. And so I think that's great. I think in terms of challenges, they're the traditional ones you have that, I've been involved with. It's everything from the transportation to housing to diversity in this participation in this ecosystem. Those things have to be solved, because if people can't afford to live here, if people can't afford to get around, if people don't feel a part of it, then all we've really done is allowed the top to continue to be the wealthy to be wealthier, and haven't done anything around wealth expansion or wealth generation.
I would say one of the strengths of the region is the ability to attract attention. Folks that want to compete with Silicon Valley or, New York or some other areas, and keep saying, why aren't we getting that kind of attention? We certainly need to get more attention. But I think the region does attract attention for a variety of different reasons internationally, and that's important. Most of what we see out of other parts of Virginia are, concerned that they don't get attention, that there may be a great idea in a company in Richmond or, in Roanoke or, someplace and they can't get the attention of investors because investors, don't look beyond, a certain number of limited areas. And quite honestly, if you're getting all of the deals you need from, a handful of areas, then you ask yourself, well, why do I need to travel to these places? But, it's one of the potential opportunities that we see. We just hosted the Virginia demo day, and we had cohort companies from 3 different accelerators in Virginia, 757, Lighthouse Labs, and RAMP. 20 cohort companies make presentations to 60 investors. And in the past, people would look at those types of demos and pitches as being second rate, or we don't want to do online. We don't want to see videos. But now this is an opportunity. It was actually the investors afterwards that said, wow, this was a great opportunity to see 20 companies in a short period of time, and then get together with the ones that we're interested in. So, I think we have the opportunity to spread some of the visibility that we have in the national capital region, beyond just the Beltway. As far as some of the strengths, clearly, cybersecurity, data analytics, enterprise and data intensive, machine learning in the national capital region are all, they're going to continue to be huge opportunities. And that's where, from the Virginia side, that's the focus. And we at CIT, we do have a focus on high tech, high growth. So, that's one of the areas we want to branch out with, particularly when we start to look at more minority founders and minority funders. We want to branch out beyond just the high tech, the small list of technology industries that we want to focus. In other parts of Virginia, we see companies that are doing well in ed tech and food tech and fintech and all of these other areas that are driving the economy right now. So we want to make sure that we're providing opportunities. We like Maryland, we've got an unbelievably diverse economy depending on what region you're in. And, we need to make sure that we're providing opportunities for folks in Roanoke and Southwest that are interested in ag tech, as much as cybersecurity and data analytics and some of the other, areas that are going to continue to grow in Northern Virginia.
Great. As we look forward now for the last part of the segment, I'd be very interested as we look forward a few years, where you'd like to see us as a region, both from the investor community perspective, from a startup ecosystem perspective. If you were stepping forward 3 to 5 years and kind of looking at where you'd like us to be, what would that look like to you? And what do you think are some of the steps that we could take today that start us along that pathway?
So I've talked about this a lot. I mean, if you have a very robust early funding cycle, the role of TEDCO dramatically changes. The short version of that is, if we do this right, we work our way out of what we do today. And that's a good thing. If we can work our way out of what we do today, then that's a good thing. And that what allows us to redeploy those resources in a very different way. Because if there's enough of an energy and enough of a robustness and as Bob talked about, identification and the recognition of those funding opportunities and the markets kind of work, that would be great. And the markets are inclusive in doing the things that include not just from a conversation of women or people of color, but socioeconomic, that there's an inclusion in that, then that would be that's panacea. And to get us there, one of the things we're trying to do, being more intentional, Anthony and Tien, around not just the founders. We have a lot of conversations, we all in this venture business, we tend to focus on the founders. But, part of what we also got to focus on is what we are calling employee number 3 through pick a number, right? And how do you get employee number 3 to be a student or a young person who, but for, would never be part of that ecosystem? They're from one of our HBCUs or from one of our regional institutions. And they wouldn't, not from the Hopkins of the world, but, from a Frostburg or from a Morgan State. How do we get them to be employee number 3, 4, 5? Because by the way, if these things even become halfway successful, that employee number 3 from Morgan State who becomes successful, they become the next generation and the flywheel does happen. And that's back to my first point and my closing point. How do we create that flywheel so that everything kind of works in the way that it should, but includes people that but for would not be included because of our intentionality of making those things happen?
Well, and I agree entirely, and I would say we'd be successful if we could find a way to better catalyze the private capital in the investment community. How we coordinate better, between the various stages, whether it's seed funding or and how do you transition? Do you abandon? Do we as an organization abandon companies after they've found a seed? Gone through a seed round successfully, and we don't. We have follow-on investment. We, have mentorship. But sometimes, there are opportunities that fall through the cracks. We just recently, you all may have seen the announcement in the TechWire that a company called ID.me, is creating 1,000 new jobs in Virginia, and we CIT, the Gap Fund, was first in with them in $100,000 investment that catalyzed their seed round. They went on to raise $41 million. They had created 200 jobs and now are creating 1,000 more. And what's really cool in there is that, our economic development partnership has also played a role in that now in keeping them, and helping them to grow through some of the incentive programs. So there's not just one solution or one organization. It's a matter of being able to coordinate and collaborate and all pull in the same, and quite honestly, not just in Virginia, but being able to work with TEDCO. As I've spoken with our Chief Investment Officer, Tom Weithman, he just speaks so highly of what Maryland is doing in TEDCO and how, as you say, it's a river. There are bridges across that river. So, we need to coordinate, a little better. But I'll also say that I would like to, and certainly some of the recent, news brings to the attention the lack of opportunities potentially for diverse investors, and we'll talk more about that, I know, in the future. But opportunities. We had a panel discussion recently where we had minority investors and founders, and it was so enormously helpful to get perspective on what's going right and what's going wrong. But the idea that somehow the National Capital Region could be something of a catalyst for those types of initiatives and funds and success stories. And I think what we really need a year from now, is some nice success stories, and that'll get the attention, that'll get the additional capital.
So I just want to follow up with something Bob said, and I was remiss in not mentioning it. So I just was on a call about a month, maybe a month or so ago now, where a group of folks got together, and the chapter got formed here in the DMV around Black VC, called the Black VC Group. And these are folks who, if we had this call, several people on the call, there was like 40 to 50 people on the call. If we'd had this call just 5 or 10 years ago, there might have been 20 people on the call. And so to have that number, and to Bob's point, these are people who've come out of the Novak's Bill of the world, who would, rise of the rest. And so you got individuals who are now in a position to be able to have a conversation that represent, have different representation. So we spend a lot of time talking about founders and entrepreneurship, but it's also important to talk about the diversification needs to happen on the funder side, that you have individuals that are running and are partners or principals at these venture capital firms. And in many cases, you have individuals who are starting out. We had a young man who just left TEDCO, Mac MacGyver, who's gotten a lot of great press. He just started a fund out of Baltimore, a rare breed. And so we're very excited about what he's doing. And so those types of individuals, and looking at the type of work that they're doing, that's the type of thing, Bob, we got to have not just diversification of the entrepreneurship and the talent there, but also the funders who do this as well.
Absolutely.
No, that is, is so important for the region. And I want to thank you both for just providing this insight and vision for our region in terms of where we are and where we have been, and more importantly, where we're going, and highlighting some of the strengths of the region. What I'd like to do now is hand it over to Tien, and we're going to focus a little bit more specifically on TEDCO and CIT. And Tien, I hand it over to you.
Thank you so much. Great insight so far, Bob and Troy. Thank you guys very much for that. One thing is very coincidental is that both of you are within 2 to 3 months of your roles as CEO. And I know, Bob, you've been at CIT for a long time, so you know the ins and outs. And Troy, you've been active in the community, so you know what's going on. But can you take a moment and articulate your vision? I mean, every CEO has a vision, right? You have an idea of where you want the organization to go, where we want to focus. I think we've touched on a lot of that already. But if you don't mind, and we have a new year coming, so maybe you can take a few moments and talk about your vision for the organization now that you're, at the helm, and what your top 2 or 3 priorities will be for 2021.
Bob, you want to lead us?
Sure. I'll be happy to lead. We at CIT and in Virginia, we're going through a tremendous transition because we just had a change, legislation that was passed in the last year that now consolidates several different organizations, and all in a very positive way. Sometimes consolidations, sound Machiavellian, but this is all bringing together organizations that focus on economic development. Focus primarily on entrepreneurial and startup economic development, and it's into the Virginia Innovation Partnership Authority. And we've also consolidated some centers of excellence that will be part of that effort, but there's increased funding from the Commonwealth. And as I mentioned earlier, there's an increased recognition of the value of entrepreneurship. As we go forward, part of, and I'll say my vision, but part of our charge is to make sure that every region within the Commonwealth has an opportunity to grow their respective entrepreneurial ecosystems. We have a program in Virginia called Go Virginia, which kind of divides the Commonwealth into 9 different economic regions, and within each region there's an economic or an entrepreneurial ecosystem, and our goal is to make sure that Northern Virginia is not the only successful ecosystem that we have in Virginia, that in fact we are developing programs and working with the regional ecosystems to develop tailored programs that support the growth of entrepreneurship in their individual regions. It's been too easy in the past to say, you want to know about entrepreneurship in Virginia? Well, let's talk about 9 different stovepipes, and we can't do that any longer. We've got to be able to bring together each of those regions to have a story about entrepreneurship and success stories in Virginia that include all of those regions. We've got to be able to brand and market the opportunities that exist in Virginia, but make sure that people understand that's not just Northern Virginia, and it's not just cybersecurity and data analytics, but that there are a tremendous number of opportunities for us. So that's our vision, bringing it together, bringing these 9 different regions together to create one macro ecosystem in Virginia. But also I want to focus again on if we don't expand the opportunities for minority, women, veteran, and rural entrepreneurs, then we've really failed. We have programs that focus on that. We can talk about that more, in a later question, Tien, if you'd like. But we really need to take a look at how we're doing things. In the recent forum that we had with the minority entrepreneurs and funders, boy, one of the clear things was that you've got to understand the investors need to understand the communities they're investing in. And if we in Virginia say we're only going to invest in high tech, high growth, in a handful, then we're going to miss out on the vast majority of opportunities in the minority community. Because, there are more Main Street types of initiatives, great investment opportunities, but in order to capitalize on that, we need to understand, the culture, better understand the culture, and some of the challenges when it comes to friends and family, and some of the other initiatives that the minority founders and are experiencing. So that's my vision. One, we really need to crack that nut. We really need to make advances along that line as a part of our overall single vision for entrepreneurship and innovation in Virginia that also includes commercialization, out of our universities and early stage companies.
So sounds real familiar. I mean, I could repeat a lot of it Bob said. I think the thing that I'd add to that, though,
I was glad to be able to go first on that one, Troy.
I'm piggybacking on you, buddy. The word I'd add to what Bob said is what I call knitting. TEDCO has to become the great knitter of this thing called ecosystem. And I actually say it a little differently. I'm an engineer by training, but I think words matter. And so actually, like I said earlier, the ecosystem has to become tighter and people have to know one another. And actually, it's about reducing the size. And that sounds counterintuitive, but the whole point of if you've knitted it together, it becomes tighter and it becomes much more efficient. And so part of the role of TEDCO, we're trying to move beyond not just the funding that we do, but how do we really build this robust thing that we call an ecosystem or innovation culture. And Bob is right, is if we don't think through how to include others, and that others is not just a women's conversation or a veterans conversation or people of color, but it's rural areas as well. And again, I don't know the stats for Virginia, but what we're seeing because of COVID is a mass, I won't say a mass, but some de-urbanization is happening. We're running out of housing stock on the Eastern Shore. We're running out of housing stock in some of our Western Maryland communities. I just got those reports here in the last couple of weeks. And so as you think about this distribution of talent into these areas, how do we take advantage of that? How do we take advantage of the fact that I believe that we're no longer going to have 5 days in the office. You have to be in the office type of, a work model. That Zoom is going to be an integral part of whatever we do. You're not trying to make a political statement or a medical statement about this vaccine, but we're going to get past this, as a country, and we're going to get past this. And so, what is our behavior going to look like differently? And how do we take the fact that people are going to now be not having to all be clustered in urban areas? Now that talent could be somewhere else, how do you get opportunities that exist in other parts of the state? And the other thing, and I didn't mention when you guys asked an earlier question, but it's an important point. When Bob was talking about accelerators, incubators and accelerators, one of the things that we're trying to do here in TEDCO, back to that knitting, is understanding how to better leverage all these incubator accelerators, because they're all kind of working independently as to working more as a whole. And one of the things that we've identified, particularly given our emphasis around life sciences, Bob, is, how do we get more wet lab spaces and more, flexible lab spaces? How do we get more what I call light manufacturing spaces? And so how do we create, people talked about, how do you get the WeWorks model going, less about office and more about working labs and manufacturing. And so those are the things that, how do we knit those things together, not replicate them and duplicate them? How do we make sure we knit them and make sure that the incubator in Frederick is leveraging the work that's going on in Baltimore? How do I make sure what's happening on Eastern Shore is doing what's doing? And so how do we knit those things together? Because as you and I both know, there's only $1 of resources available. And so how do I stretch that dollar and leverage that dollar in a fundamentally different way, as opposed to everybody getting their $1? What if we develop, and one of the things we're trying to do here in Maryland is what I call, how do we develop coalitions of the willing? How do we get a group of people around one or two specific themes, as opposed to each of us asking for $1? How do we ask for the 500 we know we really need, and we all kind of give up? As I like to say, Bob, here, you can't build an ecosystem if you got too many ecosystems. And so we all gotta give up some ego if we're going to build an ecosystem. And if we don't rethink, if all we do is what we did, you and I both, that's the definition of insanity. And so we got to COVID has allowed us to be entrepreneurial, be innovative, in what we do going forward and how we think about this notion of knitting things together, Tien, that brings more value to the whole. Because I don't know about Virginia's economy, she was just as in the dump as Maryland. The legislators have a tough job come January. But they got a brutally tough job. The numbers are getting worse, seem like every day, and we're all we effectively in a stay-at-home model at this point. And so the economy isn't going to recover anytime soon. So therefore, I'm even more emphasis that we're going to have to innovate our way out of this. And so as TEDCO, to your point, team, the vision for us is how do we leverage more of what we have? How do we better knit together what we have? How do we operate better in what we have? And how do we tell our story better than what we have?
Right. Well, thank you guys for that feedback. It's remarkable how similar the dynamics are in both of the states and how similar the challenges are. And I really applaud your ability to be so entrepreneurial and to pivot into areas of opportunity that will drive growth in both Virginia and Maryland. I'd like to go a little deeper on a topic that we've touched on, which is diversity and inclusion. This is a tremendously exciting development these past several months, a long time coming, in my opinion. It's a national movement. It's a regional movement. I think we've talked a little bit about what you got, the fact that it's important to you. But I'd like to know more about, are either of your funds specifically allocating to these underserved markets of minorities, women, immigrants, veterans, rural? How are you doing that? What challenges do you face in terms of finding quality deal flow, finding quality talent, amazing companies in the DMV region specifically? How are you going to actually put the plan into action? Go from strategy to tactics on this. I'm very curious.
So we have two specific funds. One called the Builder Fund. Again, people can go to TEDCOmd.com to find. One is the Builder Fund, Tien, and the other is the Rural Initiatives Fund. And both of them, the characteristics is just like the Builder Fund is focused on, quote, socioeconomic disadvantaged groups. You and I would say, women and people of color, but it also does include, again, poor rural folks as well. And so that fund is set up to provide tranches of funds to these individuals. But it also, Tien, to the question you're really asking, we don't just provide the money, we provide some wraparound support. We actually pay for executives to shadow these individuals. We wrap them around. We actually have a series of different classes and webinars, obviously webinars now, that we do because many of these folks, they're brilliant people, but they don't know a balance sheet. They don't know a talent plan. They don't know a marketing plan. So we wrap that around them, and we do the same thing with these rural funds. And very happy to announce, some of these funds have now followed on with institutional capital in our Builder Fund we do them in cohorts we're in our third cohort, about to go into our fourth. Of the 20-ish some companies, 6 of them now are onto their next round of institutional capital. So that's pretty darn good. So the model works, but we know we can do better, and we're going to do better. We're rethinking it and reimagining it. The same thing with the Rural Fund. But I'll close with, I've told the legislators the challenge with this thing is conceptually great idea, but there's not enough scale in it. It's like throwing a pebble into the ocean at high tide and expecting to see something different. You're just not. And so again, we're going to do what we do, but I'd be remiss if I didn't say I'm out looking for other resources, both from the state and non-state, to provide a little bit more scale, because you really do need more scale to make a real difference.
Yes, agreed.
From our perspective, within the programs that we have at CIT, I mentioned the GAP Fund earlier, and the GAP Fund, for those that don't know, makes direct equity investments in early stage companies and high tech, high growth companies, and it is general fund dollars that come from the General Assembly and from the Commonwealth. And our goal with that is to leverage private sector investment. Tien, you're involved in that process. We make small $100,000 to $200,000 investments, and the idea is to get the attention to do a little bit of de-risking for private investors that then follow on in a seed round or later stages. And that's gone exceptionally well. As Troy says, it's a matter of scale. Just how much impact can you have? But it's gone exceptionally well for us. We are seeing returns on the investments that have been made in the past, and with those returns, we created the Virginia Founders Fund, and at a proceeds, and we have more flexibility in how we use proceeds than we do with the appropriated dollars. And so we're using that to create the Virginia Founders Fund, which specifically focuses on minority, women, veteran, and rural entrepreneurs. We also now are in the process of creating a kind of a sister program called the Virginia Founders Initiative. One of the tough things that we find in the Founders Fund is that you create a program, but that doesn't mean people are going to be knocking down your door, saying, hey, I'm a minority, I'm a veteran. You still need to find those opportunities. You need to cultivate them. You need that pipeline that we talked about in the past. So our Virginia Founders Initiative is being developed to work, not to create a top-down program that stretches into each one of the regions, but to fund programs that are developed by the regions that focus on their specific needs. If you look at Hampton Roads, yes, there's a large minority community in Hampton Roads, but also think of the veterans, that there are the folks. I think it's the number one city or region in the country for people getting out of the military. And so, we've got to be able to take advantage of that. But so the Virginia Founders Initiative is going to help develop regional programs that focus on those four categories: the women, minorities, veterans, and rural. We've had some really great success stories out of the VFF already, where that has moved into larger gap investments as well. But part of what we've learned over certainly over the last few months and in the discussions that we've had is that we want to break out the I won't say just the minority founders, but Black founders, and we want to understand the companies that they're building, and the culture that they're coming from, and I'll say better understand. But that goes back to the earlier comment about you can't say we're only investing in technology. You've got to be a cybersecurity company for us to be interested in you. If you're a Black founder, we've got to understand the companies that they're building, and that needs to be part of our overall set of priorities. So we do have programs focused on this. We've got a series of initiatives that we're just in the early stages of now with the new Virginia Innovation Partnership Authority to expand what we're currently doing. But to a large extent, we're in a learning mode. We really want to better understand what needs to be done. How can we support both the founders? And part of it, I think Troy, you touched on as well. It's not just Black founders. It's the investors. We need more minority investors who understand the individuals, rather than just immediately reject them because they don't have a history of friends and family or large credit card debt, or whatever other. So we're really excited about it. We think this is great, and we've got strong support from Governor Northam and the administration, and they're delighted to see us headed in this direction.
The other thing I want to add to what Bob is saying, and back to my thing of knitting this ecosystem together, is when you look at a space like life science is a good example. You just don't have a lot of Blacks or women in that space because of the academic requirements to be in that space. But back to knitting, huge underlying of life science is going to be things around bioinformatics and the role of data. And so that's a space that we're going to try to find a way, because there are a number of Blacks that are in computer science and women that are in computer science or that are in data. And so that's how you get them in. So they might be in the core life sciences, but things around bioinformatics, data analytics, they clearly can have a role there. And so how do we get them into that sector through another means than the traditional hard science part of it? And so it's being creative and thinking differently about what supports that life science, what supports cyber or supports agri-tech or aquatech, what supports clean energy. There are these what I call horizontal skill sets that you do have some volume of women and Blacks who are in those, and that's how you get them introduced into those sectors.
Wow, this has been great. I'm so excited and so motivated about what both of you are doing. And I know we're running short on time. I have one final question. It's a quickie. We have a lot of listeners from around the region, as well as around the country, who are probably loving what you guys are saying. They're very excited about the initiatives that both TEDCO and CIT are doing. How can they get involved? How can, a mentor or an investor or an entrepreneur, how can they get involved with your organizations? And where can they help?
Yeah. So as I said, TEDCOMD.com is our website. Tien, we have this group called Network Advisors. These are individuals like yourself who are experienced entrepreneurs and have a skill set, and we bring them in as network advisors. You can come to our site and find out more, and we assign them to companies, and so they can be a part of our Network Advisors group. And so as I mentioned a few moments ago, with our rural initiatives and our builder funders initiative, we have executives who, frankly, we pay in many cases to go and spend time with these companies, these early stage companies. So number of ways that folks can get involved with us. So I, again, welcome them to come visit our website to find out more.
And that's the same advice that I offer folks. It's not an easily understandable area, a business that to comprehend sometimes, and so the details of the specific programs and the criteria and how do you get an investment and CIT.org. All the information is there, but I'll say each one of our divisions has an advisory committee. Our investment division, Tien, as you know, has a number of really just well-qualified, experienced investors that help us to make the decisions. We don't go out on our own and pick somebody and say, we're going to put money into you. There's a detailed process, and same thing with commercialization. So we have hundreds of people that are engaged in this. And if someone asked me, if I met somebody at a reception said, how do I get involved? My first question would be, well, where do you live? What region are you in? Let's start you off by getting engaged where you are, rather than, let's build this make sure we've got a strong regional ecosystem. And Troy, by the way, I am stealing your quote that you can't, you've got to get rid of the ecosystem before you can create an ecosystem. I'll give you credit for it when I use it, but I am going to use that one. That's great. And it's so true. It is so true. I think we would love to see people get involved, help us create that pipeline that we've talked about, help build those regional ecosystems so that it creates a better, creates better deal flow coming to us, and then also going beyond CIT. Sometimes people want to start at the top, the federal government, what do I need to do, with the White House, to make something happen. And where where you really make things happen is locally. So look for opportunities locally.
I couldn't agree more. Exactly correct.
Right.
Well, thank you guys both for sharing and also for spending so much time with us. I'm thrilled. I'm so happy for both organizations that they have such amazing, talented leadership at the top. And we really, I hope the two of you can collaborate together as well.
Definitely.
Bob, I'll be sending you an email as soon as we hang up.
Okay. And I will be responding immediately, Troy.
And anything Anthony and I can do to help, please let us know. And hopefully some of our viewers will be jumping in and assisting as well. But this has been really informative, extremely inspiring. I'll turn it over to Anthony for closing remarks. Anthony?
Great. Thank you, Tien. I just wanted to say again to Bob and Troy, thank you so much for being on the show with us today and for sharing such tremendous thoughts and insights. Your leadership and the importance and impact that TEDCO and CIT have both in your respective states, but also the impact that they have. And as we see more and more of the region collaboration that can happen, just the impact that's going to have on the region as well. So thank you again.
Thank you. Appreciate you guys.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you.